What's going on, y'all? It is Monday and it is sports rundown time. I am Kadarius Washington, and it is a pleasure to have you in as we look back at some of the biggest stories in the world of sports. And as I announced on Twitter and on Bluesky yesterday, at CW Talk Sports, at CWTALKS Sports on all of my platforms, that we are going to be doing this sports rundown twice a week now. We're going to be doing this thing on Mondays and Wednesdays, but nevertheless, it's a pleasure to have you in. And a little bit of news broke, if you want to call it that, as I was turning my camera on to record. And this is according to Tom Pelissero at NFL Network, that an anonymous team was seeking to ban the tush push made popular by the Eagles. Now, two things about this. Number one, I want to know who this team is. I know it says anonymous, but I want to know who it is. And number two, are we really about to do this again? I mean, seriously. A couple of years ago, when the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, ironically, we had this dialogue about wanting to ban the tush push. So are we really about to run this dialogue back? But nevertheless, again, it is a pleasure to have you in. And I really want to start this evening with the NBA. And I'm not talking about the National Basketball Association. I'm talking about the National Blowout Association. So yesterday, as I was preparing to do this sports rundown show, I came across an article from USA Today talking about blowouts in the NBA, specifically 50-point blowouts. So USA Today reported on this article from Brian Swain, who I think is a basketball advisor or something like that. He tweeted out that there have been 11 50-point blowouts in the last two seasons, which have been more than any other individual decade in the NBA. And what's interesting about it is, so obviously 11 of the last two seasons, but if you look back at some of the other the other millenniums or decades, in the NBA, you'll find that there have been 8 50-point blowouts in the 2010s, 6 in the 2000s, 7 in the 90s, 6 in the 80s, 9 in the 70s, 3 in the 60s, and 0 in the league's first 2 decades in the 40s and 50s. And along with that, there have been 19 of these 50-point blowouts in the 2020 decade alone. And along with that, this season, there have been 4 games that have been decided by 50 points, 10 games decided by 40 points, 40 or more, and 30 games that have been decided by 30 or more points, with the largest margin of victory so far this season coming just last month when the Clippers destroyed the Nets 126-67, and that was 59 points, which was a dang near 60-piecer. And on top of that, in the last 2 seasons, there have been 3 games that have been decided by 60 or more points, and the rest of the other decades, it's been a combined total of 6. And in that time, about 3 years ago, December 2021, the largest blowout in NBA history, if you remember, was the Grizzlies destroying the Thunder 152-79. A 73-point margin. Now, I've said this ever since the beginning of the season. The NBA has a really big problem with all of these games, because a lot of these games in the last few seasons have been, for the most part, non-competitive. Now, we've had some good games. I mean, we had some good action last night with the Grizzlies and the Cavs. And, of course, early in the season, I think it was the first matchup with the Thunder and the Cavs that literally came down to the last possession. So we've had some good games. We have had some close games. But for the most part, there have been a lot of blowouts. And if you even remember too, on opening night, when my Boston Celtics absolutely destroyed the Knicks 132 to 109, which was 23 points, and my Celtics trying to jack up a whole bunch of threes to get that single game 3-point record. Now that messed up our percentage, obviously, but yeah, there have been a lot of blowouts in the NBA. And speaking of the Celtics and specifically the New York Knicks, I think it's safe to say that right now the New York Knicks are on fraud watch. Because this week, they took on the two top teams in the Eastern Conference in the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics. And they got destroyed in both of those games. Cleveland almost beat the Knicks by 40, which goes back to what I opened with there being so many blowouts in the NBA. And then they get destroyed yesterday against Boston in a game where you can pretty much say that the score was way closer than the game was. And on top of that, they are 0-5 against those two teams this season. They're 0-3 against Boston, and they're 0-2 against Cleveland. Now, this is a Knicks team where obviously you can say that they've gotten worse defensively. Now, yeah, they're scoring points with Karl Anthony Towns and, of course, Jalen Brunson, the star of that team. But you can also say, too, that the Knicks have gotten worse defensively. And you can definitely see that in a few of their games this season. Now, mind you, the Knicks don't take on Boston or Cleveland again until April. But they're going to have to figure something out because because I don't trust them. I do not trust the Knicks this season. And from what we've seen in these last few games and in these last few weeks, it is very hard to believe that this Knicks team is a championship team. So, which brings me to my next point, that there's only really 6 teams in the NBA who you can make a case for that can win a title. Those teams are Cleveland, Boston, OKC, Denver, the Rockets, and Golden State. Now, I believe that Boston, I really think that Boston, and this is not coming from my bias of being a Celtics fan, but I think the best team in this field, the team that I trust the most to win a championship, is Boston. I mean, what Cleveland has done this season is absolutely incredible. They're on this little magic carpet ride, carrying the best record in the league, sharing that record with OKC. But I don't know if I trust them in the postseason. I mean, we have seen several instances in the NBA, especially in the last few seasons, where you have this one outlier of a regular season team, but when they get to the playoffs, they kind of flame out. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with this Cleveland Cavalier team. Now, do I think that their ceiling is the conference final? Yes. But going up against Boston, I think Boston may be too much of a buzzsaw for them. And really, the best teams in the East are Boston, Cleveland, and the Knicks, like I just said. OKC, the West, you might have a little bit more leeway with that. You've got OKC, you've got Denver, who you can never count out as long as they have Nikola Jokic. They have a Rockets team who has been really, really good, especially under the former Celtic coach Ime Udoka and their star players in, I believe, Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, who we've pretty much dubbed to be the baby Jokic. And how about Golden State? Ever since they picked up Jimmy Butler, Golden State has been red freaking hot. And which brings me to my next question. I mean, can you trust Jimmy Butler? I mean, yeah, he took the Heat to the finals 2 times in his time in Miami, and you would have to think that the Warriors, from the way they're playing, they might have a chance to go on a run if they make the postseason, and I do believe they're going to make the postseason. But do you trust Butler in a big spot? I mean, yeah, I mean, you still got Curry, you still got that whole Warriors core with Draymond and everybody, and obviously championship pedigree, and Kerr being having that championship pedigree as well. I mean, literally just winning the finals 3 years ago. But can you trust this Warrior team, and more importantly, can you trust Jimmy Butler? So that's something very interesting that I want to monitor in the NBA. And also, we did get a couple of other storylines for this past week. Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks getting suspended for 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug policy, which is a very crazy story at that. I mean, 25 games. I mean, wow. And I know they said in the NBA that negligence is not really an excuse for getting suspended, but that was very crazy, and it caught me off guard of Bobby Portis getting suspended for those 25 days. And also, on a more serious note, Victor Wembanyama done for the year with a blood clot, I believe, in his right shoulder. Now, thank God that the medical professionals caught that just in time, because that is a very scary and a very serious situation for Victor Wembanyama, and we are definitely praying for a speedy recovery for him. And also, we got news a couple of days ago that Greg Popovich is not expected to return this season. Of course, we know back in November he suffered that mild stroke, but it's still a stroke nonetheless, and still very serious. But I will say this. So if the Spurs decide, now I don't see this happening, but if the San Antonio Spurs decide, you know what, Wemby's out, we still got no pop, we're probably just going to go ahead and mail this season in. So if they drop the rest of the season and they somehow manage to get the number 1 overall pick again, getting Cooper Flagg, just getting Victor Wembanyama last year, and hitting a home run with Stephon Castle, if they manage to get the number 1 pick again, oh boy, that is gonna be a crazy time in the National Basketball Association. So last week, baseball, sweet, glorious, beautiful baseball made its triumphant return, albeit spring training, but baseball nonetheless. And a little bit of spring training drama never hurt anybody. So how about Juan Soto in his spring training debut with the Mets, in his very first at bat, hitting a 426-foot bomb in left center field. I mean, this is just coming off of Soto signing that massive, dang near $250 million deal with the New York Mets this past winter. And I want to know, are the Mets sending a message to the Yankees and specifically baseball? Because we've heard the stories about the Yankees and traveling and taking care of the families and stuff and all of that dialogue, but are the Mets and Soto really sending a message to baseball after this signing? And from what we saw in spring training. And I will have to say this. May 16th is circled on my calendar. Do you know what that is? That is the very first Subway Series of the year. Mets and Yankees. And when this thing goes to Yankee Stadium, I'm expecting the Yankees to boo the absolute heck out of Juan Soto. Now, albeit he helped take the Yankees to a World Series, and the Yankees, I want to think anyway, did everything in their power to keep Soto in pinstripes, but he's in the other team's pinstripes. So I would have to think that, number one, obviously backyard rivalries are super entertaining, and I think that this might just add a little bit more fuel to a Met-Yankee rivalry, and they're going to have to put every single game of this on TV. They're going to have to give it a Thursday night spot on MLB Network, Friday on Apple TV like they do all the other games, Saturday on Fox, and then Sunday on ESPN, which is another thing that I want to get to. So ESPN and baseball opted out of their licensing agreement, and as a result of that, ESPN MLB on ESPN will no longer exist at the end of the season. And it's kind of sad because I kind of like the MLB on ESPN. I love that Sunday night package that they had. Now, I've heard a lot of different things and a whole lot of different mixed reviews, but personally for me, I kind of liked seeing the MLB on ESPN in the Sunday night games during the summer, and of course, the home run derby and the wild card round. So at the end of the season, Major League Baseball is going to have to find another carrier for that. And I saw from a few articles that Amazon and CBS are in line to get this package, including Sunday Night Baseball, the Home Run Derby, and the wild card. And Amazon is pretty much getting everything now in sports. I mean, they got the NFL, they're getting the NBA starting next season, they're getting the WNBA. So as much as Amazon is getting everything, I would kind of like to see baseball on CBS, because obviously I'm 22, I'm not old enough to remember this, but I would like to think that there was a time that baseball was on CBS, and it had a lot of nostalgic feel for a lot of the older fans. So that's something that I would kind of like to see. I would really love to see baseball go to CBS. Now, that's just me personally, but we're getting streaming on sports enough, and we got to keep the cable thing present and relevant in some kind of a way. And I think baseball would definitely do well there. Another baseball storyline that I want to get into, I didn't cover this last week. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. turning down a deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, Vlad Jr. gave the Blue Jays a specific deadline to get a deal done, and gave them until midnight. I forgot the day, but he gave them until midnight that day, and they were nowhere close to a deal, according to Vlad Jr. And so he will become a free agent at the end of this season. Now, this is exactly what the Blue Jays didn't need. I felt like the Blue Jays were kind of coming along. I mean, they were coming along slow, obviously, but this is something that the Blue Jays did not need to see happen with Vlad Jr. And honestly, I don't know what the Blue Jays are going to do. I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know what they're going to do if Vlad Jr. messes around and he walks. So that is definitely something to monitor there, especially as the season goes along. And if Vlad Jr. has a career year, like if he has an incredible season, obviously, then that's going to put the Blue Jays probably in a tougher spot. But nonetheless, that is something. Now, I love Vlad Jr., but I really want to see that Blue Jay team do well. And another team that I want to see do well is the Boston Red Sox. And there was a little bit of drama coming out of that Red Sox camp with Rafael Devers refusing to give up third base for Alex Bregman. And if that were to be the case, that would relegate Rafael Devers to becoming a DH. But here's my thing. Here's my take on it. Now, I see both sides of this argument with Rafael Devers and Alex Bregman. But here's my thing. Bregman is a Gold Glover. But Devers, is literally about a season, 2 seasons removed from being a Silver Slugger. So I think Devers really is a better hitter than he is a fielder. So I really feel like this move probably would have benefited Rafael Devers more than if he just stayed at third base. So, and plus I've said all the time, baseball is better when the Red Sox are good. Now, take it from me. I'm a Nationals fan. And I've heard accounts from a few baseball fans from back before interleague play became a thing in the 90s where baseball fans would have 2 teams that they rooted for. They would have an American League team and they would have a National League team. Now, obviously, my National League team is the Washington Nationals. But my American League team is the Boston Red Sox. I always root for the Boston Red Sox, which I've kind of said I am a very low-key Boston sports fan. But baseball is better when the Red Sox are good, and they do not need this clubhouse drama. Like, come on, dude. Figure something out. For once, you're actually being taken seriously. You have a good roster. You could do something with this. But nonetheless, this is just drama. We'll see how all of this plays out and if anything changes. But I wanted to point that out. The Red Sox are actually good. So Boston, do us all a favor. Please, please, please don't blow this. Because we actually want to see you win. Maybe not Yankee fans, but I want to see you win. Does what I want in sports even matter? Anyway, I want to get into this Four Nations face-off in hockey. So, I have to say this. When it comes to hockey, me personally, I'm more of a wake me up when it's playoff time. Like, I'm obviously always interested in the Stanley Cup final. I am a very good, I'm not going to say very strong, but a very good Vegas Golden Knights fan. Just won a title a couple of years ago in the NHL, but I don't think that I've ever been as invested in a hockey tournament as I've been in the Four Nations face-off. Like, from start to finish, that was incredible hockey. Baseball, I got baseball on the brain. Hockey, the NHL, they really hit a home run with this Four Nations final. And I saw the other day that the Four Nations final between the USA and Canada got 9.3 million viewers. The most watched NHL event ever. It's crazy because they outdrew that unmitigated disaster of an NBA All-Star game. It's crazy how hockey changed their All-Star format and made it so much better. And the NBA changed their All-Star format and made it so much worse. But enough about that. Let's get into the actual game. The USA and Canada, as expected, in the final had a whole lot of drama in it. and Canada ultimately defeated the U.S. 3-2 in overtime. And Connor McDavid, who else, scored the game-winning goal for Canada. Now, I'll say this. Now, obviously, there's no bigger prize in hockey than the Stanley Cup. But a performance like this, we already know that Alex Ovechkin Alex Ovechkin, shoot. Connor McDavid is the face of hockey right now. I mean, easily the best player in the league. And a performance like this is something that definitely promotes his greatness. And it builds that resume of being an all-time great player. And that, from McDavid, from what we saw now, the goalie from Canada, his name slips my mind right now, but he was absolutely lights out in that game. And albeit the U.S. was injured, I mean, Matthew Tkachuk had absolutely no business being on that ice to begin with. But an amazing pass in overtime set up the goal for McDavid, and the Canada team defeated the U.S. Now, I understand that there was a lot of politics involved in the game. U.S. booing the Canadian anthem, and then Canadians booing the U.S. anthem. But I don't care about that. I just want to watch the hockey. Like, I don't want to make this thing any more political than it should be. I was just in it for the game, and lo and behold, that game absolutely delivered. Now, I think of it like this. In 2024, last year, obviously that was the year of women's basketball and women's sports. I mean, obviously you have Caitlin Clark going on that absolutely ridiculous run, and Angel Reese in the Be It. But I think 2025 may be the year for hockey. Because not only did you have this Four Nations face-off, you have another running storyline going on with Alex Ovechkin, as he notched a hat trick yesterday and is up to 882 career goals, which is 13 shy of the great one, Wayne Gretzky's record. So I think this is absolutely awesome for hockey. Just coming off an amazing tournament, and now you have a chance for Alex Ovechkin to break an all-time record in the sport of hockey. This is exactly what the NHL needs, especially to grow its fan base, because they're obviously overshadowed by the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball. But hockey, albeit their viewership numbers have been a little bit disappointing, have really been coming to their own, and I've been really interested in the hockey. So that is a very interesting thing going on in the NHL. All right, so we've had a wild, and I mean a wild and crazy week of college hoops. And I'm wondering this. So Cooper Flagg, I think he scored 10 points a game, scored 10 or more points a game, all except once this season, and that was way early on. But my concern is, are we setting Cooper Flagg up for failure? Because I think right now he's one of the most hyped players in college basketball since Zion. And so far, Zion, albeit the injuries, his career for the most part has been a disappointment. Now, like I said, it's because of injuries, but when he's on the court, he's a great player. But that's his problem. He's not on the court. So my thing is, with Cooper Flagg and everything that he's doing at Duke, and in all likeliness is going to be the number one pick in this year's NBA draft, are we setting him up for failure for what we're seeing? I mean, don't get me wrong. Duke, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, you see my North Carolina jacket, so I really hate giving Duke props with everything in my being. But Duke has themselves a heck of a team. Shire, to his credit, is a heck of a coach, and Duke might mess around and they might do something crazy. Like, win in this tournament, which is exactly what I can't stand as a North Carolina fan. And speaking of North Carolina, Caleb Love, I'm going to say this. Love hurts. Love sucks. How in the world did North Carolina let Caleb Love walk away like that? I mean, I've been watching Arizona games for the last few weeks now, and Caleb Love, I mean, dang. All of these ridiculous shots and all of this clutchness to him. I mean, albeit on Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, they went up against BYU. A crazy shot to send to in the last seconds of the game. And obviously, Arizona got screwed by that bad call as the time expired, pretty much giving BYU the game, which is a pretty constant problem that I've had in sports, in letting these officials deciding the outcome of a game. But Caleb Love, I don't understand why he couldn't have just stayed at Carolina. Like, I mean, come on. Another thing that I want to get into with college basketball, here's one thing that I do love, though. St. John's. I love the Johnnies. I love Rick Pitino. How about them on yesterday getting a huge win against UConn in a packed Madison Square Garden? Now, albeit UConn fans, from what I've heard, travel good as well, so you can understand that from a regional standpoint. But what Rick Pitino has done with the Johnnies in his second year is incredible. Like, you can definitely make a case for St. John's to go to a Final Four. I mean, they're just that good. You can make a case for them to win the Big East, because you would have to think that St. John's right now is the best team in the Big East. UConn, like I said a couple of weeks ago, has taken a step back in this regular season. We'll see what happens in the NCAA tournament, if they even make the NCAA tournament. But what St. John's is doing with the old school coach and Rick Pitino is absolutely incredible, and they are definitely going to be one of my favorite teams to watch once we get into the NCAA tournament in a few weeks. And how about Oregon getting a huge overtime win over the then 11th ranked Wisconsin Badgers? Oregon, they're going to be another team that I'm going to have my eye on, especially in the Big Ten as we get into these conference tournaments beginning next week, given that this is the last week of the, this is now the last week of the college basketball regular season. And Kansas, I mean, geez. Earlier this week got absolutely humiliated by BYU 91-57 in a loss so bad. They were the 23rd ranked team this weekend. Now they're completely out of the top 25. But that was absolutely embarrassing, losing that way to BYU. And this is obviously, you can say right now, the worst Kansas team that probably Bill Self has ever had. I mean, and there was a little interesting story that I saw. Now, I think this is old, like a year old anyway, but there was a story on Bill Self actually considering leaving Kansas to go to Oklahoma State. Now, albeit, I think he comes from Oklahoma. I think he came from Oklahoma, and I think he has a history there, but that would have been interesting to see him leave to go to Oklahoma State, and obviously that would have been a huge story. Now, ironically, they just beat Oklahoma State in a pretty dominant fashion this past Saturday, but that was a little interesting story that I had. And how about Tom Izzo and Michigan State? They're another team that you can't sleep on once we get into the tournament time. Now, a lot of the all-time great coaches in college basketball are gone. Krzyzewski is gone. Jim Boeheim's gone. Jay Wright, who won 3 championships, he's gone. I mean, a lot of these coaches, Jim Larinaga, dropped out in the last few seasons because they can't stand the direction the game has gone in with NIL and transfer portal and not being able to coach the way they want to. But Izzo and Pitino are 2 of those old school coaches that have stayed in this thing, and it's really working out for them. And this is going to be a very interesting thing to I mean, seriously, is it March yet? Because college basketball and the NCAA tournament is better when Rick Pitino and Tom Izzo are coaching good teams. So it is going to be a very exciting time in March. And there's a few teams in college basketball who you can make a case right now could win the title. Auburn, Duke, Florida. I'm not really big on Alabama winning it. Tennessee, Houston. You can make a case for Iowa State. And as I mentioned earlier, St. John's. And I'll say this, don't sleep on BYU because they just got into the top 25. But from the way BYU has played these last few weeks, they could do some damage in the NCAA tournament. So this is the last week of the college basketball regular season. As I said, we're getting close to conference championship time next week, and I am super excited. This is going to be an incredible NCAA tournament. And it's like every tournament is one of those things in sports where every year is better than the last. And this is going to be, I really feel like this is going to be an exciting March for college basketball. And a little note too, with the AP poll just coming out, we also have a new number 1 in women's college basketball. Texas getting that spot. They take on Georgia later tonight. And that comes after the previous number 1, Notre Dame, lost to NC State in a double overtime thriller. And I'll cover that more in depth tomorrow on the all-new women's basketball rundown. Yes, I'm starting a new show, the women's basketball rundown, taking place of the Unrivaled rundown. Now, I'm still going to cover Unrivaled like I've always have for the podcast, for the broadcast tomorrow, but that was something that I wanted to say on here. I said this on Twitter yesterday, but I'm saying it here too. And we're going to be doing the women's basketball rundown on Tuesdays and Fridays. So that's something to go ahead and keep your eye on for the 3 of you who actually care about what I have to say about sports and all that is about that and the world of sports is concerned. But nonetheless, that's going to do it for the sports rundown. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Twitter or X and on Bluesky at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports. Stay tuned for my women's basketball rundown tomorrow, and I will see you then. Good night, everyone.